or something. Yeah. Uh, this is a new show. I mean, it's been more than a week now. Then the result of 2020 election and the winning of the Democratic candidate Joe Biden by a huge number or margin has been debated and contested by Trump and his gangs and thugs and denying the reality. TV reality show host is been hit by a new reality. This country is changing. It's multicultural, multi-ethnic, and diverse. This is the new reality that Trump and Republican don't want to accept, and they're gonna resist until the lost idiots, and they're gonna stay with Trump until the ship, falls altogether. I mean, here the Nation had a headline: Donald Trump has suffered a defeat of historical proportion. And the article is really comparing what happened in the 80s. Ronald Reagan, the Ayatollah of the Republican conservative movement in this country. They're iconic, they're mullah, they're emotional and ideological figure, won only by 50.7% of the popular votes. And Biden surpassed that by 1% or 2%, and it's increasing every day because the council hasn't been finished and done yet. So the idea and the headline of close contest by some of the conservative media like Wall Street Journal and all of that, Fox News announced Biden is the winner. And that's why they are now in trouble, and Trump is launching a crusade against Fox News, the one it really made stupid people famous. And so Fox News was the only outlet for Trump to go and espouse racism and nonsense and reality that is not there. How he is handling COVID and police brutality and racism in this country. That was the only outlet for him to have his own reality. Today we're going to talk about the Latino vote. A lot of analysis, a lot of talks about how the Latino votes voted. They probably a little bit different than 2016. Trump got 27%. Or 28% Latino votes in 2016, a little bit higher. But it is misleading because I don't know if there is even such thing as Latino votes, one block, monolithic. No, the dynamic of Latino vote is shifting and complicated. And we're gonna have here a guest that is following the politics and Latino community. Hector Garcia is a consultant. He works with a lot of nonprofit organizations and is very active in the community. And he'll be with us very shortly to shed some lights on how the Latino votes went this election. What are the main issues? And do they, vote based on one issue or different issues? And there is a similarity between the Latino votes here in this country. So here, as you can see, Latino votes have grown confidence in Biden on key issues, while confidence in Trump remain low. This is done right before the election, and you can tell that the Latino vote new issue, health, public health, by 70% from June was 60%. Country closer together from 55% in June went to 70%. Those are the issue that concern the Latino. make good decision about foreign policy, went from 58 to 68%, effectively handle law enforcement and criminal justice issues, went from 56, 6. I expect that to go much higher, especially what Trump is doing with the wall and degrading and this insidious, poisonous language. Good, very good.
That's a nice background you have.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no. Thanks for technology, fake technology. No, the election is over, according to a lot of people, a lot of outlets, even world leaders, start congregating and calling Biden more than a week now, and it took about 5 days to come up with a winner. And the Republican Trump and his Republican gangsters or whatever, they just refusing to accept the new reality and conceded that they lost. And so, I mean, we know and blacks and immigrants and soccer moms and suburbia and city and county, and but the block of Latin voters really a little bit complicated, and a lot of people try to simplify it as one block, monolithic issue and all of that, but it seems like the Latino voters are more complicated than that. More than 60 million people from different country, different issue dynamic. And we have here Hector Garcia. He has really been following and working with the Latino community for years, consulting businesses, international business. And he actually published a book called Clash or Complement of Culture, Peace, and Productivity. And I think this is targeting people who are doing business or doing politics in the Latino community. So welcome to the show, Hector. And, you know, first of all, is there a such thing as Latino votes?
Well, first of all, Ahmed, it's great to see you. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show, which I've done in the past a couple of times. I will answer your question, but before that, let me tell you that I always think in context of what I state and write, and the whole subtitle of the book was not complete in your statement. It's Clash or Complement of Cultures, question mark, subtitle, Peace and Productivity in the New Global Reality. And so it's in the context of the new global reality, not just for Latinos, but for nations and minorities, majorities, ethnic groups, etc., refugees, immigrants. And within the question that you are asking me, I want to share with you my goal is progress in a civilized society by pursuing truth, justice, healing, and rebuilding, being wise, reflective, doing research and having dialogue, not blaming, not having polarized positions, and the incapacity to compromise, because that's not a democracy. Okay, so having said that, what I believe is that you're correct. It is not a monolithic entity, the Latino vote, because there are many different kinds of Latinos. There are Latinos like myself who came with higher education. We came from a middle or an upper class for different reasons than the immigrants who come because they're desperate to escape oppression or economic injustice, or who just want to survive and are unable to do so in Mexico or Central America. There's also the Latinos who live in Florida, for example, a large number of which came from Cuba, escaping Castro's communist regime. A lot of Venezuelans now who are escaping the terrible economic disaster caused by Chavez and those who followed him. There's also people who have lived here for generations, even before this nation was started. There were Mexicans in what is now New Mexico and what is now California and Texas. And they still have descendants who represent a part of the Latino vote. Then there is the orientation of the voters who are Latino, who are either Catholic or evangelical, who are primarily focused on the Roe versus Wade issue and are pro-life. There's also activists who are enraged by the disparities that have existed between the majority community and the Latino community in education, health, housing, justice, opportunities of all kinds, which, by the way, Minnesota, as you probably know, has some of the worst in the country because of the recent arrival of immigrants and refugees to Minnesota, which clashed, as Samuel Huntington's book would say in his Clash of Civilizations, because they're coming from different universes of education and wealth or lack of it. So I hope that answers your question to some degree.
You did well, and I mean, I was reading some report about some of the reason why the Latino community, when they voted for Trump, about 28% in 2016, I'm assuming a little bit higher this time. But one of the reasons that a person or a buffoon like Trump is appealing to some of the Latino community, they came from a culture of dictatorship, and it seems like this macho man that they're going to protect him, it linger with them once they cross the border and I come live here. Can you entertain that issue a little bit? I don't want to generalize.
Certainly. In Latin America for centuries, there has been a strong orientation towards following strong men, caciques, they're called, or caudillos, who tend to be autocratic and who tend to be macho. Macho is a Spanish term and is commonly used in Mexico and other countries of Latin America. And perhaps some people who are still influenced by that legacy, which came from the colonization of Latin America by Spain, Portugal, and other countries, is what led many of them to decide to vote for Trump, which I think is the focus of your question.
Yes, and they are a little bit similar also, not just in South America. Also, there is that kind of sentiment and legacy even in the Arab world. And I think Trump also appealed his macho, buffoonish, dictatorial aptitude or attitude also appealed to some of, especially Arab men. And I was watching and following how Egyptians live in this country voted in 2020, and it was divided based on this is generalization. I'm sure there's other issue too about their affiliation with local politics. So Al-Sisi supporter will vote for Trump, and non-supporter will vote for Biden.
Coincidentally, I talked with someone in Mexico City recently, and I was informed that there are groups that have been organized in Mexico who have been marching for Trump and proposing that the re-election of Trump was a good idea. And I would assume they were saying that to their relatives and friends in the US. And I try to find out who's funding them, who's behind them, but I was unable to do so.
Why it seems like the relationship between the Democratic Party and the Latino community, it seems like the Democratic Party doesn't do a good job. I mean, Biden, Sleepy Joe, I mean, it didn't act in Florida until a few weeks before the election. And they've been always taking the Latino and also African American and other for granted.
Timing and prioritizing are terribly important when we're facing a very difficult dilemma, such as the one we're facing right now, of a very divided nation. And so I think whatever judgment is made on the issues that you brought up, which are accurate, needs to be done in the context of we've got an urgent pandemic to address. The union of this nation is collapsing, and democratic practices are not what they used to be. So, given that, I'll answer your question more specifically.
Even before the dynamic, and the Democrats also have that tradition of taking blacks and Latino for granted.
For granted, yes, yes. I was referring to democracy, the concept, not the Democratic Party.
I see.
The process of discussion, compromise, reflection, which all three are not in vogue, it seems.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm saying in regards to your question is that, yes, I have been very involved in trying to address some of the low expectations, I would call it, of minorities, Latinos included. And this magnanimous attitude towards the minorities as that implies that we can't really take care of ourselves. So the people in the majority are going to take care of us, which is, I think, what you're referring to. So if you don't know the huge contributions that minorities have made to this nation and are still making it now, and I've written primarily about the Latino community and its economic contributions, which is what I would assume everybody expects. Okay, so you're here, what are you gonna bring to the table? But contributions are not encouraged when people around you, people in power, have a condescending, low expectation from you and your children. And I think that's where it comes from, the taking for granted because not much can be expected from you.
I see. Interesting.
And so until that attitude changes and people honestly look at the facts, starting with Native Americans, if it weren't for Native American land, none of us would be talking here. Or Mexican land after the US-Mexico War, or the huge contributions of Asians in their work in the railroads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And today, if people would take the time to look at the contributions that are all the minorities are making to the overall economy, there would be greater respect. And it's that respect, recognition of the contributions that minorities are making that I believe you're referring to.
You know, it seems to me when you look at Trump the last 4 years, and the way he talking about immigrants, the way he talks about Latin Americans and Mexicans, and demonizing them and accuse them of being rapists and thieves and shitholes countries, and talking about building a wall. How could that be appealing to some of the Latino community that actually support Trump of stopping the caravans and stopping immigrants from Latin America? I don't get the dynamic of it.
I think it's an emotional reaction on the part of different groups. For example, with the Cubans in Florida, they associate any social progressive position as conducive to a communist dictatorship. In the case of others that are not so extreme, the role of the admiration of machos plays a part. The habit of listening to leaders of that nature speak in our own countries of origin, because that's the way they speak, and conduct their affairs in government, in ruling the nations. Accustomed to living, I grew up in Mexico City. If you've ever visited Mexico City, you'll see walls all over the place. So the fact that President Trump says he's going to build a wall doesn't seem all that foreign or bothersome. I think that it's also derived from a perception of scarcity. Like we've got what we came here for. We're living in peace. We're making a reasonable living with 2 or 3 jobs. Let's not let anybody else in because they're going to take away the little that I have. So, there are multiple positions of that nature, especially when we're having a decline in the economy and COVID numbers mounting so rapidly. People are scared. And anybody that tells them that they're going to solve the problems because they have the solutions, they're going to perhaps follow, especially if they don't know much about history and which systems work and which systems fail.
Well, this has been always the problem, history and education. And it seems like education is not the top priority for some of the immigrants, and they want to come here and they turn into a survival mood. So there's not much energy left to go to, especially higher education and get into that type of issue and become a victim of this type of falsehood and misinformation.
Let me comment on that, because I think education is the core of the problem to a large degree, and it's the source of the solutions. If there were more educated new immigrants, in particular from Latin America, in both this nation's history and culture, they would be more in tune with the true ideals of the nation, not with the ones of winning is the only thing and looking out for number one. I think we need to better educate the minorities that have not been appropriately educated. Now, you find in contrast minorities that are doing very well, such as the Somalis came with some members who were highly educated, the Chinese as well, and in the case of Latinos, there's a large proportion that come from the fields of Mexico or Central America, escaping extreme poverty with very little education. And they need to be guided into succeeding in attaining higher education if necessary, or performing construction or other manual skills at which they're very good. So integration to contribute is the challenge. How do we get the majority to not blame minorities for problems that they did not create?
Well, there is a lot of racism, and the history is long and deep, and I know you talk a lot about, even in your book and in our earlier conversation, about getting on the table and try to work out our problem by listening to each other. And I think I've heard you once saying the solution is not a zero sum. We could be not win a winner and a loser, or win and lose, but could be both winners.
Exactly.
An alien concept.
In my theory of cultural complementarity, win-win is the proposition. And I demonstrate fully how it has worked that way in many disciplines, in many countries, in many sectors, including and especially in American democracy when it has worked well. Now, it worked well for the majority, but it didn't work well for some of the minorities. And this was not sufficiently of interest because our numbers were minuscule. Now that our numbers have reached very large proportions to where our representation can be significant, all of a sudden it's become a problem that we did not prevent. We did not think far ahead into the future. And now we need to make a correction for that. And the challenge is going to be how to change the mindset of people that have branded minorities as not being equally intelligent or as conducting themselves as civilized individuals, not realizing that it's the setting into which they're cornered by prejudice that makes them react negatively sometimes. I'm not justifying negative reactions, but if you corner people, that's usually what you're going to get. You're going to get desperate reactions. So for them and for minorities like us, the solution is to respect other people, to deal with them honestly in dialogue, not as tokens that are shown to be participating, but as active, engaged people whose opinions are respected and followed.
You need to have a different paradigm, different way of looking at the world around us. And thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day. I wanted to